The gates of Coronado shuddered open, and the guards froze where they stood. Through the heat-shimmering air, a lone figure advanced, her uniform stained with desert dust. Her shoulders bowed under the unbearable weight of two men draped across them. Navy SEALs unconscious, wounded, bleeding. Her boots struck the pavement with a rhythm that carried both defiance and exhaustion. Soldiers who had read her obituary last month stared in silence. She was supposed to be dead, and yet, here she was. The condolence letters had already been sent. Her commanding officer had signed his name with solemnity, folded the flag meant for her family, and moved on. She had been mourned, remembered, and neatly filed away in the annals of sacrifice. But the dead do not usually walk back through the gates, carrying the broken bodies of men still fighting to breathe. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the scrape of her boots, the labored rasp of her own lungs. She stopped at the center of the courtyard, lowered the wounded men gently onto the concrete, and raised her head. Her eyes, red-rimmed and hollow with sleepless nights, locked onto the faces around her. No words passed her lips. She didn't need them. Silence has a gravity, and in that silence, every man and woman present felt the unbearable weight of their own shame. She was Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hale. To the untrained eye, she was nothing extraordinary. Average height, lean but scarred, her face carrying the faint white line of shrapnel across her jaw. But Evelyn had carried men through dust storms, led convoys under fire, and memorized the names of the fallen so none of them would ever disappear into statistics. She wore her pain like armor, invisible yet unshakable. Years earlier, she had been the last one standing on a rooftop in Kandahar, shielding 3 Marines with her own body while calling in the medevac. The helicopter had lifted away with the wounded aboard, leaving her crouched in the dust with blood soaking her sleeves. When the insurgents closed in, she had fought with a sidearm until silence fell. The Marines lived. Evelyn carried their faces with her every day since, but her service came at a cost. Each letter she had written to the families of men who never returned had carved a hollow in her chest. The last one nearly broke her. Her closest friend Lieutenant Brooks killed during a night raid gone wrong. Evelyn had been there, had dragged his body half a mile under fire, and had held his dog tags so tightly her palm bled. Command saw only a report. She saw the face of a brother she could not save. Then came the ambush. Official reports listed her as missing in action, presumed dead. Command wasted no time. Condolence letters were dispatched, her belongings boxed, her name etched into a wall of remembrance. But Evelyn was not the kind to accept death easily. In the barren outskirts of Helmand, she awoke buried beneath rubble, her ears ringing, her ribs shattered. 2 SEALs lay half dead beside her. No reinforcements came. No rescue arrived. So she dragged them through desert wind, through hostile villages, through nights where every breath was a gamble. The sand burned her throat, her boots disintegrated, and her strength bled away with every step. Yet she kept going, guided by a single vow that pulsed in her chest. No one gets left behind. By the time she staggered onto the base, her body was more wound than flesh. Her lips were cracked, her skin blistered by sun, her eyes hollow with grief and fury. She should not have been standing, but she was. And now, she stood in the courtyard of a base that had already buried her, facing the officers who had signed her death into permanence. Colonel Mercer was the first to step forward. His crisp uniform, his medals, his polished shoes all looked obscene against the blood and dust on Evelyn's fatigues. He cleared his throat, but words failed him. The eyes of the entire battalion were fixed on her, and for the first time in his career, the authority of his rank felt flimsy, almost laughable. Everyone waited for Evelyn to speak. to condemn, to rage, to demand answers. But she said nothing. Her silence was sharper than any weapon. The men she had carried were rushed away on stretchers. Bystanders whispered, shifting uneasily, caught between awe and shame. A few saluted instinctively, their hands trembling. Others could not meet her eyes. And still she stood unmoving, unflinching. The murmurs grew into questions, whispered too loudly. How could command abandon her? Why did no one look harder? Why was she left for dead while she carried life back on her shoulders? Evelyn's silence was an indictment. Against bureaucracy. Against the hollow rituals of condolence letters signed too easily. Folded flags given too soon. Against a system that honored the dead while abandoning the living. And yet she refused to scream. Her dignity was her rebellion. Her stillness was her judgment. One young private, barely 19, finally broke the paralysis. He stepped forward, boots clicking nervously, and raised his hand in a salute so rigid it shook. The movement caught like wildfire. One by one, soldiers, sailors, airmen, marines, all turned toward her. Salutes rose in a ripple of steel, a tide of respect that could not be commanded, only earned. Colonel Mercer's face drained of color. His authority was gone, replaced by something larger, the silent honor of men and women who recognized sacrifice when they saw it. Evelyn's eyes softened, just barely. She raised one weary hand and returned the salute, her arm trembling from exhaustion. For the first time, the silence broke not with words, but with the thunderous unity of every soldier's hand raised high, their faces solemn, their respect undeniable. And in that moment, something unspoken crystallized. Silent dignity, they would later whisper, carries more weight than 1,000 speeches. Another would repeat her vow. No one gets left behind, not on the battlefield, not in memory. And the words most remembered of her that day were carved in silence, but spoken later by those who watched. Honor does not die. It walks, it carries, it endures. As the stretchers disappeared into the infirmary and the courtyard emptied, Evelyn remained. Alone now, the dust swirling around her boots. She looked up at the flag whipping against the blue sky. Her lips moved slightly, not in anger, but in quiet remembrance. She thought of Brooks, of the names etched into her memory, the weight of every fallen comrade carried in her soul. She thought of the condolence letters she had written, the ink that stained her fingers darker than any blood. She thought of the families who would never see their loved ones walk through the gate as she had. Her silence was not absence, it was reverence. Long after that day, stories of her return spread through barracks, across bases, into homes where soldiers' families listened with wet eyes. Some called it a miracle, others called it justice. All agreed it was a reckoning. Because when authority failed, Evelyn had carried honor on her shoulders. When the system wrote her off as dead, she proved that sacrifice breathes, walks, and refuses to be forgotten. And so the story ends not with fury, but with reflection. Silent strength is not weakness, it is defiance. Respect is not owed to rank or ritual, but to sacrifice. And honor is carried by those who refuse to abandon the living or the dead. Wherever you are watching from, take a moment to share your thoughts. Who are the silent heroes in your own life? The ones who carry burdens without recognition. Comment below, and let this story live beyond this screen. And if you want more stories that honor those who walk with unshakable dignity, subscribe. Because silent heroes like Evelyn Hale deserve to be remembered not in condolence letters, but in living memory.